At first glance, the question of time travel may seem simple. Its answer either a definitive no, for a multitude of reasons, or an enthusiastic yes, supported by an equally vast array of arguments. Yet in truth, the inquiry into the possibility of time travel stands among the most intricate existential questions humankind has ever contemplated. Since antiquity, the concept of time has ignited deep human curiosity, not merely as a continuous stream or a wave that carries us along, like the ocean pushing a floating ball, but as a mystery tied to the essence of freedom, fate, identity, death, and the dream of immortality. In our present age, time travel is no longer merely an ancient fantasy or a whimsical theme fueling the imagination of science fiction novels and films. It has become a subject of serious discussion at scientific conferences, a topic for philosophical dissertations, and a concept explored within religious interpretations. And yet, it remains shrouded in paradoxes that strike at the heart of our understanding of existence. Does time travel defy logic? Is it compatible with religious doctrine? Is it scientifically feasible? Or is the entire notion a grand illusion serving hidden purposes? Is time a straight line, an arrow that moves relentlessly forward? Are the past and future real, or are they merely labels imposed upon a sequential flow, devoid of true substance? Can time be regarded as a physical dimension, like space, that one can traverse? Or is it simply a human perception, a construct with no reality outside our consciousness? If one were to journey into the past, could they alter their fate? Or are we bound by a fixed destiny, every detail predetermined and unchangeable? Does time travel challenge our sense of self? Would a traveler remain the same person upon returning to the past, or become someone else entirely? And could time itself be a prison for humanity, with time travel offering an escape, not just from its constraints, but perhaps even from death? Despite appearing like a closed loop or a labyrinth whose paths lead endlessly into one another, we are compelled to enter this maze in search of answers to a vast array of existential riddles. Even if we emerge without definitive answers, the very act of embarking on this intellectual voyage reshapes our understanding of time, its relationship with freedom, fate, and the nature of truth itself. Most importantly, it may help recalibrate a compass that has subtly drifted from its true direction. Let us begin with the abstract essence of time, which has long captivated the minds and imaginations of humankind, not merely as cascading grains in an hourglass, or the turning hands of a clock, or even the rhythms of nature in day and night or seasonal cycles, but as an enigmatic force governing every instant of our lives, a law so absolute it binds us inescapably. Or does it? In the late 17th century, Isaac Newton introduced the concept of absolute time in his seminal work Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica. He envisioned time as an independent entity, distinct from space and matter, flowing uniformly and unchangingly in the background, unaffected by events or objects. This simplistic notion of time underpinned the formulation of the law of universal gravitation and Newton's laws of motion, all of which rest on the assumption of a single, universal time variable shared by all observers, regardless of their relative velocities. This framework enabled the precise calculation of an object's position, velocity, and acceleration at any given moment, in accordance with the principle of determinism. Determinism, a philosophical doctrine, posits that every event in the universe follows a logically predetermined sequence, an unbroken chain of causality governed by fixed laws, what some refer to as the laws of nature, while the devout view them as the will and decree of God. This conception also contributed to the development of classical dynamics and our understanding of light and electricity, all while treating time as a constant, mathematically rigid and devoid of any deep physical interaction with the material world. However, from the standpoint of classical physics, this understanding fell short of explaining all observable phenomena, paving the way for a scientific revolution that redefined time as an active component of the cosmic fabric. At the dawn of the 20th century, Albert Einstein, through his theories of special and general relativity, introduced a transformative view. Time was no longer an isolated dimension, but an inseparable part of a unified continuum, space-time. Einstein portrayed time as a relative dimension, mutable and dependent on velocity, a concept known as time dilation, where time slows down for objects moving at higher speeds. For instance, if a person were to travel through space at nearly the speed of light for a year, time for them would proceed normally. Yet upon returning to Earth, they would find that hundreds of thousands of years had elapsed here. Gravity in Einstein's general relativity is no longer described as a conventional force, but rather as the curvature of space-time caused by mass. The greater the mass, the more pronounced the curvature, and consequently, the slower time flows in that region. This is the principle of gravitational time dilation. Without delving into overly technical details, we can simplify the distinction as follows. Classical or Newtonian physics treated time as an independent, linear, and uniform variable, a constant reference frame for all events. Relativity, on the other hand, dissolves this constancy, presenting time as a dynamic dimension intertwined with space, forming the fabric of space-time. Moreover, time is also influenced by gravity and velocity, capable of accelerating or decelerating based on the intensity of gravitational fields or the speed of motion. To grasp this shift, let us briefly revisit the notion of dimensions. The universe comprises 4 dimensions: 3 spatial, length, width, and height, and a 4th, non-spatial one-time. These 4 dimensions together form the fabric of space-time. Thus, time is not merely a passive backdrop against which events unfold, but an essential element that interacts with matter and energy, shaping and being shaped by them. In this light, time forms the very foundation of existence, for objects do not merely move through space. They traverse the fabric of space-time itself. As much as relativity seemed to offer a resolution to the riddle of time, it soon found itself confronting the specter unleashed by Max Planck, quantum mechanics. Then came string theory, endeavoring to reconcile the two by presenting a unified mathematical framework that encompasses all fundamental forces in the universe. Though these attempts to understand the nature of time and its relationship to spatial dimensions have yet to yield definitive solutions, they have opened entirely new horizons in our comprehension of life and existence. They have laid the scientific groundwork for exploring additional dimensions that transcend our traditional perception of the material world, approached not only from a scientific standpoint but crucially from a philosophical one. And here, let us underscore the word philosophical. For many so-called scientific theories are, in essence, philosophical hypotheses dressed in mathematical attire. String theory posits that the universe is not composed of point-like particles, as proposed by the standard model of particle physics, but of one-dimensional strings vibrating at various frequencies, with each vibrational pattern giving rise to a different particle. Yet, this theory cannot hold mathematically within the confines of a 4-dimensional framework. To maintain internal coherence, it proposes the existence of 9 spatial dimensions in addition to 1 temporal dimension, 10 dimensions in total, curled up upon themselves in infinitesimal loops, imperceptible to direct observation. In its more advanced form, known as superstring theory, an 11th dimension is added to enhance mathematical harmony and bring the theory closer to a grand unification of all natural forces. With the introduction of these additional dimensions, referred to as higher dimensions, quantum dimensions, or hidden dimensions, time emerges as a concept far more intricate than previously imagined. It may consist of multiple layers or facets, which only reveal themselves through interactions with these hidden dimensions. This revelation has inspired philosophers and scientists alike to reconsider reality not as dimensionally confined, but as a rich and interwoven structure. Thus, string theory redefines time in a way that renders time travel more than mere science fiction. The universe becomes an immense, multi-layered expanse, a vast landscape of parallel universes, other realms that may obey entirely different physical laws or subtly deviate from ours. These universes are adjacent to us within the fabric of spacetime, yet remain beyond the reach of our senses and instruments, bound as we are by our perceptual and technological limitations. Now let us circle back to relativity and some of its propositions that affirm the theoretical possibility of time travel. But before we proceed, we must remember that we are still wandering through a labyrinth, one that weaves between scientific insight and philosophical interpretation. And once again, let us emphasize the word philosophical. When Albert Einstein introduced his theory of special relativity in the year 1905, he overturned the prevailing understanding of time by linking it intrinsically to spatial dimensions and the velocity of an object. As previously mentioned, time slows down as one approaches the speed of light. This means that an astronaut traveling at near light speed would return to Earth to find that decades had passed here, while only a few years had elapsed for him. Assuming, of course, that space itself still exists. In this sense, the astronaut would have, at least theoretically, traveled through time. General relativity took this notion even further, positing that gravity influences the flow of time. Again, presuming gravity itself is real. In other words, the closer one approaches a massive object, such as a black hole, the more time slows down relative to someone farther away. If a person remained near the event horizon of a black hole for just a few minutes, they would return to Earth to discover that centuries had passed. Thus, this individual too would be considered a time traveler. Now imagine the fabric of space-time as an actual stretched cloth. Placing a massive object on this fabric causes it to bend. This curvature is what leads smaller objects to orbit around larger ones, moons around planets, and planets around stars. Regardless of whether this is literally true, suppose someone standing at one edge of the fabric wished to reach the opposite side. They would have to traverse a long distance. But if we could fold a fabric so that the starting point meets the destination, a shortcut would emerge, known as a wormhole. A traveler passing through such a tunnel would cover an extraordinarily short distance to journey from one end of the universe to the other, effectively becoming a time traveler. For traversing space-time implies movement not only through space but also through time. Based on these theoretical premises, scientists affirm that travel into the future is, at least in principle, possible. However, travel to the past remains forbidden, obstructed by the law of causality, or more precisely, what is known as the grandfather paradox. If someone were to journey back in time and kill their grandfather before he fathered their parent, how could that person have existed in the first place to make the journey? We shall return to the topic of time travel from a scientific perspective and the solutions some scientists have proposed to resolve this paradox. But first, let us explore what the philosophers have to say about time. The concept of time has long preoccupied the minds of philosophers and thinkers, not as a physical entity, but as one of the most profound ideas entwined with consciousness, existence, and truth. Philosophically, time is not viewed merely as a succession of moments or the ticking of a clock, but as a multi-layered stream. Among these layers is objective time, the material, sequential time familiar to us. Then there is psychological time, the internal sense of time, the human perception of its passage, which varies from person to person, making hours in joy feel like fleeting minutes, while sorrow stretches minutes into what feels like days. Lastly, there is spiritual or eternal time, an infinite, transcendent dimension beyond the bounds of matter, one we cannot perceive within our earthly lives. Some philosophers went even further, questioning the very ontology of time itself. Does time truly exist? Or is it merely an illusion constructed by the human mind to impose logic upon the sequence of events? In this vein, the ancient Greek philosopher Parmenides argued that motion and change are illusions, deceptions of our fallible senses. For him, absolute reality is an unchanging existence, an eternal unity. And since time is inseparable from change, it must belong to the world of illusion rather than to the essence of truth. Plato adopted Parmenides' notion of immutable existence, but sought to reconcile it with the reality of change. He saw time as a moving image of eternity, flawed reflection of the ideal world. Aristotle, on the other hand, asserted that time is real and has existed eternally, not as an independent entity, but as a measure of motion and change. Augustine rejected the idea of time's eternal existence, contending instead that God created time along with the universe. Thus, time is tied to the changeable nature of creation, experienced by creatures as a flowing sequence, but not by God, who beholds all of time in a single, timeless vision. Modern philosophers added new layers to the discourse. Immanuel Kant viewed time as an a priori condition for knowledge. Our minds are innately structured to perceive the world through a temporal lens, though time itself may not be a part of objective reality. Martin Heidegger went further, making time the very essence of human existence. We understand ourselves only through our temporal being in the world, what he called being toward death. Henri Bergson, meanwhile, rooted time in its psychological nature, criticizing its reduction to quantitative units like seconds and minutes. To him, real time is the qualitative flow of lived experience. On another front, some philosophers raised compelling questions about the link between time, identity, and the self. If a person were to travel into the past, would they remain the same? If they were to meet a younger version of themselves, which one would be the real self? Undeniably, those who most vividly exploited these intricate and often contradictory scientific and philosophical propositions were the writers of science fiction, authors who transformed time travel from a purely philosophical meditation into thrilling adventures, dramatic tales, and profound existential reflections. Foremost among them was the pioneering British novelist H.G. Wells, who published his landmark work The Time Machine in the year 1895. Opening the door to dozens of novels that explored time travel as a technological marvel, one that could plumb the depths of the past or unveil the mysteries of the future. With the rise of cinema and television, filmmakers swiftly capitalized on humanity's enduring curiosity and ancient longing, delivering dozens of successful productions that further embedded the idea of time travel in popular imagination. Notable among these is the Back to the Future trilogy, which follows a teenager who travels through time using a time machine built into a car by his eccentric friend. There's the Terminator, telling the tale of a robot sent from the future to assassinate a woman destined to give birth to the leader of humanity's resistance against machines, while a soldier from that resistance travels back to protect her. 12 Monkeys recounts the story of a prisoner dispatched from a post-apocalyptic future to the past to gather intelligence about a deadly virus that decimated most of humanity. Looper presents a grim reality in which a criminal syndicate sends victims into the past to be executed by loopers, one of whom is tasked with killing his future self. Interstellar explores the journey of astronauts through a wormhole in search of a new habitable planet, deeply engaging with the concepts of time and relativity. The butterfly effect dives into the eponymous theory, suggesting that even minor changes in the past can provoke monumental shifts in the future, through the story of a young man able to relive key moments of his life. The time traveler's wife portrays a man afflicted with a genetic disorder that causes him to involuntarily travel through time, and the emotional turmoil faced by his wife in building a life with someone who keeps slipping away through the fabric of time. The genre also flourished in television dramas, such as Doctor Who, chronicling the adventures of a mysterious being who travels through space and time in a machine, encountering alien species and correcting the course of history across the ages. The Girl from Tomorrow features a young woman from the future who journeys to the present, confronting both technological and human challenges in a world far less advanced than her own. In Stranger Things, a boy vanishes in a small rural town, prompting his friends to search for him with the help of a mysterious girl possessing supernatural abilities, eventually uncovering the existence of a sinister parallel world. And the German series Dark masterfully weaves a tale of a child's disappearance in a forest, unraveling profound secrets tied to time travel and intergenerational connections across 3 family lines. Even in the Arab world, literature and cinema have not shied away from engaging with this genre. Works such as Conqueror of Time and Dancing with the Devil are examples of homegrown explorations of science fiction, echoing the global fascination with the possibilities of traversing time. These are but a few among dozens, perhaps hundreds, of literary, cinematic, and television works that have cemented time travel in the collective consciousness. No longer merely a fantastical notion, but a dream that science might one day bring to life. Or at the very least, a subject worthy of serious inquiry within the halls of theoretical physics. One intriguing case often cited is that of American author Morgan Robertson, who in the year 1898 published a novel titled Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan. Though the novel does not directly address time travel, it remarkably foretold the sinking of the Titanic 14 years before the real-life disaster occurred. The parallels are uncanny. Both ships bore nearly identical names, both struck an iceberg, both lacked sufficient lifeboats, and many more startling similarities. Some argue Robertson had intimate knowledge of large ship designs of the era, making his fictional catastrophe plausible. Others believe, quite fantastically, that he somehow glimpsed the future and transcribed it into fiction. Yet most who recount this story omit the fact that after the Titanic sank in the year 1912, Robertson republished his novel with edits to make it more closely mirror reality. And this brings us to the crux of the matter, the enigma of time travel itself, or rather, the great vortex that has drawn the human mind into a house of mirrors, where nothing is quite real. But is there something real behind the mirage? In the next part, God willing, we shall continue our journey through the lens of religion, exploring true stories of time travelers and the gateway of dreams into the symbols and signs of time. A journey that may reveal one of the greatest deceptions in human history and show us that we may have spent lifetimes chasing phantoms, uncertain whether they are echoes of a forgotten past or the ghost of a future that may never come.